morning. I have with me a favorite book. You want to read it for us? Just the title. The Quilt Maker's Gift. This is a favorite of mine. It's by Gail DeMarkin. And just so that the adults don't feel left out, the pictures are going to be on screen behind us. So you can kind of scooch in a little bit if you want to see it with me here. I like the fact that we're close enough together that I don't have to try to hold it like this and show it to you, because reading upside down is really hard for me. I don't have to read it upside down. What a pleasure. The Quilt Maker's Gift by Gail DeMarkin. There once was a quilt maker who kept a house in the misty mountains up high. Even the oldest great-grandfather could not recall a time when she was not up there sewing away day after day. Here and there and wherever the sun warmed the earth, it was said she made the prettiest quilts anyone had ever seen. Woo, that is pretty. Bing! That means turn the page. Some said there was magic in her fingers. Many people climbed her mountain, pockets bursting with gold, hoping to buy one of the wonderful quilts, but the woman would not sell them. I give my quilts to those who are poor or homeless, she told all who knocked on her door. They are not for the rich. Bing! On the darkest and coldest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the town below. There she would wander the cobblestone streets and come upon someone sleeping on the ground in the outside chill. She would then take her newly made quilt and wrap it around their shivering shoulders, tuck them in, and tiptoe away. Now, at this time, there also lived a powerful and greedy king who'd like nothing better than receiving presents. Hundreds of thousands of beautiful gifts he got for Christmas and his birthday were never enough. So, a law was passed that he could have his birthday twice a year. When that still wasn't enough, he ordered soldiers to search the kingdom for those few people who had not yet given him a gift. Bing! Over the years, the king had come to own almost all the prettiest things in the world. Throughout the castle, from top to bottom, on shelves and in cupboards, there were the most glorious items you have ever seen. Look at them all. There's no room even to walk. Bing! And yet, with all these treasures, the king never smiled. Look at that grumpy face. Somewhere there must be one beautiful thing that will finally make me happy, he said. I will have it. And then he heard about the quilt maker. He sent his soldiers up to the quilt maker to demand a quilt. But when they arrived at her house, the quilt maker merely laughed. My quilts are for the poor and needy, and I can easily see that you, the king, are neither. I want one of those quilts, the king yelled. It might be the only thing that will make me happy. Bing. The woman thought for a moment. Make presents of everything you own, she said, and then I'll make a quilt for you. With each gift that you give, I'll sew in another piece. When at last all your things are gone, your quilt will be finished. Give away all my treasures. Bing! I can't do that, cried the king. I love all my wonderful, beautiful things. But if they don't make you happy, the woman replied, what good are they? That's true, the king sighed. And then he thought about what she had said for a long, long time. So long that weeks went by. Oh, all right, he finally muttered. If I must give away my treasures, I must. Bing! The king went to search his castle for something that he could bear to give away. He searched from top to bottom and finally came out with a single marble. A single marble. But the kid that he gave it to smiled so brightly that he went back inside and got a few more things. He got a pile pile of velvet coats and went about the town giving them to people dressed only in rags. They were so pleased that they made a whole parade. Still, the king did not smile. Sheesh. Next, the king fetched 100 waltzing blue Siamese cats and a dozen fish that were clear as glass. Oh, bing! She did it anyway. Then the king ordered his merry-go-round with the real horses to be brought out. Children cried with delight and cartwheeled around him. And just the tiniest smile started to form at the corner of his mouth. Do you think he's getting happier? I think so. The king looked about him and saw the dancing and merrymaking and all the happiness his gifts had brought. A child took his hand and pulled him into the dance. Oh, there he is. You see him down there at the bottom? Now the king really smiled and even laughed out loud. How can this be, he cried. How can I feel so happy about giving my things away? Bring everything out. Bring it all out at once. Meanwhile, the quilt maker kept her word and started making a special quilt for the king. With each gift that he gave, she added another piece to the quilt. So the king kept on giving and giving, and when at last there was no one left in town who had not received something, the king decided to go out into the world to find others who might be in need of his gifts. Before he left, the king promised the quilt maker he would send a sparrow back to her each and every time he gave something away.
That is right.
Yeah. Bing! For years and years, the sparrows flew as the quilt maker's window, to the quilt maker's window, as the king slowly trading his treasures for smiles around the world. Look at all the places he visited. I know. On and on. Oh, bing! The quilt maker worked, and piece by piece, there we go. The quilt grew more and more beautiful. Finally, one day, a weary sparrow flew into her window and perched on her needle. There's the sparrow. She knew then and there that it was the last messenger. So she put a final stitch in the quilt and started down the mountain in search of the king. After the long search, she finally found him. The king's royal clothes were now in tatters. He sure is. Look at his face. I keep losing I bet I know what it is. Hang on a second. It's this cord that's getting mixed up. Sorry, this is the best part of the book. All right. After a long search, the quilt maker finally found the king. His clothes were now in tatters and his toes poked out of his boots. Yet his eyes glittered with joy, and his laugh was wonderful and thunderous. "What's this?" cried the king when he saw the quilt. "As I promised you long ago," the woman said, "when the day came that you yourself were poor, only then would I make you a quilt." "But I am not poor," he said. "I may look poor, but in truth my heart is full to bursting, filled with memories of all the happiness I've given and received. I am the richest man I know." "Nevertheless," the quilt maker said, "I made this quilt just for you." And the king received the gift that he had always wanted. The end. What was the gift that the king always wanted? Happiness. Yeah, it wasn't really the quilt. It was the look on his face. Yeah. I invite you, as you head back to your seats, we're going to continue to talk about this book in the adult sermon, or the everybody sermon, maybe is a better word for it, because you might like it too. You're welcome to take a marble out of that vase there. You might need a little help. So let's go do that together. Thanks for coming up. Can you guys reach in here? Oh, you can. Everybody's tall enough. Perfect. I'm going to give you a few to choose from here, Eric. Take one. Yeah, just one. Everybody takes one. Okay, good. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
So this book, The Quilt Maker's Gift, and our gospel lesson have a lot in common. Both feature men who have many possessions. In both stories, they're invited to divest of their many possessions. And there's also a quixotic figure who issues that invitation, the quilt maker and Jesus. I paired this gospel lesson in The Quilt Maker's Gift, though, for another reason. It's for what the stories don't have in common, and that is the ending. The Quilt Maker's Gift concludes with the king in worn-out clothing, filled with joy. The gospel story ends with the man leaving in sad dejection because he couldn't give up the things that stood in the way of what he really wanted, to follow Jesus. I'm interested in this gospel character, this man. He seems to be very sincere in his request to follow Jesus, to know what it is to have life eternal. He kneels at Jesus' feet, a sign, a posture of prayer. He keeps all the commandments. In fact, he's been faithful since his youth. He's like one of the people that you and I would admire for the way he lives out his beliefs. But clearly, something is missing. And he believes that this rabbi, Jesus, can tell him what it is. Perhaps we should be surprised that he doesn't take Jesus up on his offer. He asks Jesus for what he wants, and Jesus gives him the answer. But not only that, there are others who have done as Jesus says. Consider the apostles. Peter and Andrew left their nets and their boats to follow Jesus. James and John left their father-in-law sitting on the beach. Levi left a profitable business as a tax collector. The disciples exchanged their livelihood, their possessions, and their daily life with family to be with Jesus. No questions asked. But if I'm honest with myself, despite this pattern of selfless giving in our Gospels, I identify more with this guy in this lesson than I do with those disciples who seemed to be ready to follow Jesus and all that that entailed at the drop of a hat. And I think that many of you might be with me on this one. We might be more likely to go away grieving if we were the man than divesting of what we have that stands between us and following Jesus. At the pastor's Bible study this week, we wrestled with Jesus' extreme words. Sell what you own, he says, and give the money to the poor. It seems a bit unreasonable, don't you think? I mean, after you give all your money away, after you give away all your possessions, what are you supposed to do? Mooch off your parents? What do you think about that, parents? There's some parents here today. And then Jesus says things like, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. How judgmental is that? But then someone said, I think the key to this passage is these words. Jesus, looking at the man, loved him. Jesus loved this man. The Gospel of Mark only has 2 places where it says Jesus loved someone, and this is one of them. So, if Jesus loved this man, I presume that like the people I love, that he wanted the best for this man. He knew what was best for this man, and he was offering it to him, the way to life eternal, abundant life, exactly what he was asking for. And yet, This man could not trust the truth of this, letting go of things in order to receive, because somehow he had not the experience of it. And that's why I love the quilt maker's gift. The king so desires what he lacks, but he isn't stuck there. Eventually, he decides to try it out and give away one of his many beautiful possessions. It is kind of a feeble start. I mean, one marble? We still have a whole lot of marbles left. And yet, as he sees the reaction, as he starts to feel something in his heart, the giving becomes easier and easier. It starts to become fun and a way of life. Following the invitation of the quilt maker, gradually he lives into its truth. He lives into experiencing the truth. That is, in giving that we receive. And he finds the joy that he was always seeking. We don't know what happened to the man in our gospel lesson today. All we know is that after Jesus said to him, "Sell what you own and then give the money to the poor and come and follow me." All we know is that after hearing those words, he pulled back and he went away grieving. But I wonder if he remembered those words of Jesus and mulled them over into his mind and gradually thought about it again and decided maybe he could take one step down that path. Perhaps there was more to the story than simply leaving with a sad heart. Perhaps, like the king, he did begin to give away his possessions and finding that he felt more joyful, more liberated, more free, more connected, more in touch with God's purposes of mercy and justice in the world, and that it was worth it. Perhaps this man found that giving was not a dreary sacrifice like he thought, but rather the key to life with a capital L. Or perhaps this gospel story finds its ending in you and in me. Perhaps it is we who take it from where the man in the gospel lesson leaves off and into the future. We who know what it's like to cling to the familiarity of our patterns and possessions. We who are creatures of comfort. We nonetheless seek Jesus. We kneel at his feet in prayer. We desire to be with him and to be connected to what really matters. And because we long for these things, because we long for Jesus himself, perhaps we too might hear the gift in his words in this gospel lesson. Perhaps when we hear Jesus' words, "Sell what you own, give the money to the poor, come and follow me," perhaps we can hear it as an invitation to continue this man's story with our actions. Perhaps it starts with something as small as one marble. Perhaps it's letting go of one thing that stands in your way of a closer walk with Jesus. It begins with one gift. It begins with one confession. It begins with one act of mercy. And it grows until it becomes natural to give and to forgive, until it becomes part of our day-to-day living to have the joy of sharing and caring. So today I invite you to consider your own sharing of time, talent, money, and possessions. It is the annual appeal time of our congregation, after all, and we have high hopes, high goals, a heartfelt mission to share. You'll hear more about it in the coming weeks. But today I invite you to consider giving for a deeper reason. And that is that we are all like the king in the story. We are all the man in the gospel lesson. We all have a spiritual need to give, to let go, and to follow Jesus. And so I ask you, how generous are you? Where is God asking you to call? Asking you to let go? Where is Jesus calling you to follow? Take a marble from the jar on your way up to communion today and pray with it in the next few weeks. See how Jesus is calling you to share and to follow. It may just be what your heart is longing for. Amen.